Welcome to Rauta, I am Jerry and this is Trip to Norwegian Black Metal from the 90s episode 2022. As with the past more than 20 episodes behind us, we've already tackled all the bigger names, all the mid-sized names, all the smaller names, with the exception of some underground names, mostly extinct already and stuff like that. That is mainly the kind of a demo bands which cease to exist after very little time of activity, or like in this case, actually changed names and a little bit style over the years as well. So it's gonna be diving into the world of underground black metal from the Norway early 90s, not exactly the modern names. That's been the story so far, and this time I hope to talk to you about the bands you might not have been listening to. At least for me, these were all more or less bands that I knew only by name and fame, not so much for the music. So it was an interesting trip for me as well. First, we'll start with Mock, already started in 1991. And that is a band, of course, which later on turned to be Kampfar. That is nowadays, at least, one of the most successful Norwegian black metal, if we, of course, remove from the equation big names such as Darkthrone, Mayhem, Tåke, Emperor, and the like, Satyricon, Immortal, and Abath included. But Kampfar has been, climbing up the ladder recently. Actually, during recent years, they've been working their asses off for past 30 years. But before that, there was for a short period of time, a band called Mock. And like I said, that later on, when it was dissolved, Dolk, the main man of Kampfar, moved to form Kampfar a few years later. But during those early years, even Mock got to do something worthwhile mentioning. That is a demo EP and a split, and technically speaking, a compilation that put it all together here. For me personally, obviously, I went through the compilation, so it gave me a quite a over feeling, over feeling. What the hell I'm saying? Like the overall feeling about the whole thing. What was it like? How it sounds and all that stuff. Now, if you're looking at these review scores, I don't know who wants to read so much Metal Archives reviews, especially when it's just single ones which are obviously super bad or super good. There's like no middle of the road things. You might already see like this is quite peculiar take on the reviews. Like first demo is 30%, the EP after that is 100%. Obviously different reviewers and all, but might give you a little bit like weird eyebrow raising. What the hell is going on here? Let's not focus on that, but talk about the early releases from 1994 and 1995 before it basically call it quits. As you can see here, it already said that here's active force from 1991 to 1994, and these came afterwards. So it might be like some kind of a post-mortem thing when it comes to a lot of bands back in the days. You first do your demos and all that stuff, and someone later on like comes up like, hey, I'm gonna release them, and like whatever, it's bygones already. It says here, however, that 2012 and onwards the band has been active, but I would take with a grain of salt. I mean, at least there are new recordings, not the band is really active and all that stuff, but who knows? Who knows? Here it actually says that at least a couple of members are active in that segment, but let's be honest about it. I wouldn't really call it that active unless there was a new recording and something like big important live settings and all that stuff. So if we go just with the Mock compilation, you get a little bit of idea what is going on. So it's just roughly 30 minutes, give or take, with only a few tracks which are then again scattered throughout the early works by the band. Now, this is very typical early black metal bands from the second wave and all. There's nothing out of ordinary in terms of music. Not saying it's bad or anything like that, but not very good either. In my opinion, what started with, for example, Kampfar debut album, there is a huge difference in quality and even in style with the music. Mock was more like or is with this compilation and the previous ones which this is made of, more like a very simplistic, quite raw, partially because lack of production budget and all that stuff, but quite raw, quite crude, quite homemade black metal. Like you can already figure young guys figuring out their first songs, doing something that they are driven into, probably going after bigger bands. I mean, even though 1994 seems like ancient times by now, back in the days there was a big difference whether a band already had something out by, say, 1990, 1991. And we're talking about bands like Burzum, Mayhem, Darkthrone, enslaved and all that stuff. So coming 1994, you're already a little bit too late to the first steps of the second wave. I'm not saying it's not like early works and all that stuff, but saying there is a difference if you start in 1991 and have your first demo out in 1994. Those 3 years, they are like a big difference in terms of music style. So when Mock came out with their stuff, obviously I wasn't there to see what kind of waves they made, because I started this Dolks band with Campfire anyway. But I could imagine this went under the radar for so many reasons. First of all, the music isn't outstanding, even if it's totally listenable, even these nowadays standards. It's just kind of a basic raw end of black metal, not super raw like Ildiarn or Swordvokter or the golden era of Darkthrone. Then again, not also as aggressive as some other bands that already were there doing their indie stuff. So coming a little bit late to the party, things didn't go probably as their plan, and as such, I guess Mock was buried, and then Campfire emerged, and they started great with the first album. So in case you missed Mock back in the days, I'm guessing you didn't miss that much. This is more like an interesting thing to go through the attic treasures and figure it out how they actually sounded and all that stuff. But I guess if you start comparing this to Campfire, you are kind of bound to be a little bit disappointed, because obviously it's demo stuff and it's nowhere near as good. But then again, like I said, it's nothing bad. It's just pure mediocrity in terms of second wave black metal, and that's pretty much the whole chapter included. Worth a listen, but only for curiosity, not so much for quality. Similar thing happened with Thule, which was basically the predecessor of Tåke, which you can see here on Metal Archive site. So if you think Tåke is one of those newer bands started as late as 1995, think again, because it already existed just in 1993 for a few releases, basically these 2 demos. And then you have this Split Heinor Svart Metal, which is basically just, putting old things on track like Thule and Tåke material. So it's more like an official way to release these old releases, old songs and all the stuff. What is interesting, however, that during these 2 demos, which I listened on YouTube, Der Vinterstormen Raste from 1993 and Omfavnet av Svarte Vinger a year later, there's a big difference in terms of quality and songwriting. I would say this first demo is much like the Mock material. Not very interesting, but I mean already the band is figuring out what they want to do with, and it's of course Norwegian black metal. Now with Omfavnet, it's like a big step towards Darkthrone style, and in my opinion a lot better than Raste one. And it's actually very, very different than what Tåke started to do. So it's interesting because this Raste, or Vinterstormen, Winter Storm, could really be closer to what Tåke started to do a couple of years later, and then moving into full albums and all. Whereas this Omfavnet is kind of a Darkthronian take. It's almost like moving into a different direction. And then Tåke is coming basically back to the first demo style, but obviously with better songwriting, better production and all that stuff. In my opinion, these are somewhat more interesting than the Mock ones, because there's already this curve of progression, evolution to be heard. And as such, it would have been interesting to see where would Thule go had they kept going with this name and style rather than starting Tåke. Now, not saying that starting Tåke was a bad idea, obviously. Just saying this is quite a different take, and these 2 could have existed separately from one another. But sometimes things don't go like that, so there's that. We shall see if there will be ever Thule's take in some form or another, because once again it's here presented that they kind of existed, but also mentioned that only a couple of gigs were played in 1993 or so. Anyway, more like a curiosity thing, much like Mock. So in case you missed his demos back in the days, you probably didn't miss that much. But once again, an important factor in understanding how things got born. I mean, there's a reason why certain bands start with album right away instead of making demos. And sometimes there were those other bands before that, so acting like the pre-versions. Much like you would think about like Hellhammer preceding Celtic Frost and the like. Then last, and unfortunately also the least, is Troll. This is not the bigger troll coming from Norway, but the smaller one from Olfjord. And this has themes trolls. I was checking out the members list and really couldn't figure out much going on with the other guy, guitarist vocalist Stig, doing stuff, whereas Trond Frønes has played in some other bands, but let's be honest about it, nothing big came out of that, at least in terms of Norwegian black metal. Here it says it was founded in 1993 and the activity is not tracked after that, but since there is only one demo out, well, you can pretty much figure it out. This is indeed a little bit of a black metal / Dungeon synth part, so very, very typical Norwegian demo tape in that sense. 4 tracks, 19 minutes and all that stuff. It's not bad. It basically goes with the same quality lines that with Mock and Thule's early works. So once again, nothing outstanding, but more like a curiosity. Actually, I was thinking of skipping the whole band because there is only one demo out, whereas Thule and Mock then again evolved into Kampfar and Tåke. But I decided, like, what the hell, let's include it, because I guess it's worth knowing that there are 2 trolls. I mean, there are more than 2 bands, but 2 black metal ones. And this is not to be confused with the more known troll, which then again went into some different direction. Both sound very, very Norwegian, but also quite different. For example, this demo 94 is almost like you would take a lot of those early 1990s Norwegian black metal ones and then put some more tease or Burzum into the mix with the dungeons and parts, and then you would get the demo. It's by no means a bad release, but once again, much like the early Thule and Mock versions, very, very crude versions of what could have been, both in terms of production, songwriting and all that stuff. So it's more like a typical demo in the sense like you're searching for your style, figuring out what you want to do and all that stuff. And then you have the kind of a crude production, which is nothing out of ordinary in the sense of being bad or good, but also there were so many bands that already had figured out things way more professional, faster, technically better, more powerful and all that stuff overall. This is more of one of those curiosity tracks or releases for back in the days. Like I even talked with one of the old Norwegian black metal guys who have been making zines and all that stuff. And when I mentioned this other band Troll, he was like, oh, I never heard of it. And I kind of understand. I mean, why would you if there was only one demo out back in 1994? I would have totally missed this unless I was actually, doing a lot of searching both on Metal Archives and other sources looking for bands to be included in these episodes. So in case you missed all these bands and you do have very, very little interest checking them out now, you won't be missing too much. You really can't compare none of these bands to the album level bands, not to mention the bigger ones. But if you're into underground, if you want to go a little bit deeper than your typical mid-sized Norwegian black metal bands, of course you want to check them out. All these releases mentioned in this episode, be it Troll, Thule or Mock, can be found on streaming services or at the very least YouTube. And of course some people will have the original copies of these tapes or whatever in some boxes in the attic or basement or whatever. So maybe you need to revisit them if you're one of the owners of these tracks, and if not, I don't know, maybe do yourself a favor and get a glimpse of them on YouTube and whatnot. But now you know a little bit more. Now I know a little bit more because I missed all these bands back in the days, and I guess for a reason. But let's see about them, and we still have a few bands left for future episodes. So before we call it quits for the whole Norwegian crash course in 1990s black metal, there's a couple of episodes coming more out, and we'll see what kind of bands we will include in those ones. Now off you go. Looking forward to your comments and questions. Bye bye.